Welcome. I'm Angel and I've got a hefty script to spew you today, so why not go ahead and get started already? So, Chapter 5's Weird Route was certainly something. It was creepy as hell. If you haven't seen that yet, I'd suggest you go look into it before watching this video because I'm going to talk about it a lot, but not. Here's a quick summary. After Chris wakes up incredibly late, they walk with Susie through the winding down festival. At the lake, they find Noelle, and Noelle forces Chris into the lake. No matter what you choose, proceed or not. And they descend further into the lake and eventually a white void seemingly out of bounds of the town. Once the scene ends, an unfamiliar menu appears asking the player to insert Chapter 7 Side B. There is no Dark World, no Castle Town, nothing. It simply ends and the chapter closes itself, not even a save file to return to. Now, after seeing the Weird Route in Chapter 5 for the first time, I saw several people mentioning a theory saying Noelle and Chris could have fused to become the Knight. However, I think what's going on may be even more mysterious. I think Chris and Noelle have fused to become the Angel. Side note before we get started, I'm going to be using she/her to refer to RALSEI because look at everything about her. RALSEI is an egg of a trans woman and I'm not going to misgender her for the sake of a theory. If you want a video about that, I could probably rant about that for hours too. Thanks. What specifically drew me to this theory was during my own playthrough of the Weird Route. In Chapter 2, when he first approached Spamton in his dumpster with Noelle, he addresses the both of them by going, "Angel, Angel." He's not directly talking to specifically Chris or Noelle here, but both of them. Even the Addisons called him an angel when selling the freezer. But while at the starting point, this by itself isn't much. So what else do we know for certain about the angel? Well, truthfully not much either, but we do know they are very important to the prophecy. During Chapter 4, the image of the angel is purposefully obscured to us. Susie seems enamored by it, and RALSEI is almost sad about it. We know RALSEI keeps a lot of the prophecy hidden in order to protect Chris and Susie. If RALSEI knew what, or even who the angel was, she probably wouldn't say. In Chapter 5, she even prays for whatever the ending is to not happen. Now, if the Weird Route is the prophecy, this could be why RALSEI is so terrified of it happening. I mean, RALSEI says she wants Chris and Susie to be nice and not fight in order to prevent the prophecy in some way. The Weird Route, where you do fight and in Chapter 2 even kill things, would be the antithesis to everything RALSEI wishes for. We never see the end of the prophecy, though. Just like the angel, it is kept completely hidden from us. Susie destroys it and vows for it not to happen, and RALSEI is too afraid to even say it out loud. Clearly, what happens must be horrendous, right? They both care about their friends, of course they wouldn't want to see any of them hurt. At first, when Chapter 4 had come out, I assumed that maybe someone would die. RALSEI would, or Chris would, something. And a great sacrifice to save their friends. But after Chapter 5, I think it's much worse. Because it doesn't have anything to do with saving people at all. It's not a sacrifice, it's a suicide. Noelle herself also has much angel imagery surrounding her. Her dark world outfit is very wispy like a spirit, and she talks of growing wings and flying away in Chapter 2. Even in her closet are a pair of tattered angel wings. Now, if Noelle has gone out of the world with Chris, out of bounds of hometown, she alone couldn't be the angel. It would have to be both of them, right? They both have moved on, and the soul is inside both of them, to become inseparably part of the prophecy. A big part of Deltarune is the core theme of your choices don't matter. This is repeated in Chapter 1, it's one of the first things Susie ever says to you, and you consistently get choices cut off or not mattering while playing. Even the game's website and Steam page say it only has one end. Now, why I mention this is because of the thank you survey and how it shows that the Weird Route is the prophecy's true ending. This survey had a big, although vague, reveal about Chapter 5 right before it came out in regards to the lake. Now, the other question of the survey from a while ago, how long did it take her to smile, could easily be applied to the normal route. Noelle smiles in her date with Susie, having finally achieved her long-awaited romance. But this one, the question where will it take place, and its subsequent answers can only be applied to the Weird Route. The official survey of the game, from a place acknowledging only one ending, focuses on the Weird Route. Why would that be? Even the other answers relate to the Weird Route, not just the lake one. Any person who answered about the Dark Worlds or Flower King received the response, "I have some bad news for you." No, you'll figure it out yourself. This is because the Weird Route in Chapter 5 doesn't have a Dark World at all. and from the person who entered the response with Susie, they were told, "Too late!" But especially this response piqued my interest. You want to see them together so badly. You want to see those red eyes dance, even so, it's wrong. Everything about it is wrong. But what good is it for me to say? The heart does what it does. So don't worry, you'll make it. You always do. Don't you? This response was given for anyone mentioning the Ferris wheel. The big moment for Susie and Noel's romance was blatantly told, "You're wrong." You may ask, but it's such a big part of the game. How would it be wrong? Because the weird route, the true end, won't let it happen. Noel and Chris instead are forced to be together. In Chapter 2, Chris forces Noel into the choice of her going with him on the Ferris wheel. Noel can't get her moment with Susie, for the prophecy won't allow it, because everything about it is wrong. Another side tangent. Who the hell answered where it snooshed the survey? I just want to talk. Meet me, 5 p.m. at the Shelter. This relates to the one ending thing, but I thought it deserves its own section. RALSEI. Sweet, sweet RALSEI. RALSEI is both terrified of and obsessed with the prophecy. She denies herself autonomy and a gender crisis because of the prophecy. She constantly tells that while she wishes for the end to be changed, she can't break the rules because it would ruin everything. Chris has to reassure her things are okay, that she's allowed to do things she likes just for herself. If Chris says it's okay, then she can do it. Just like Noel, just like in the weird route. But in the weird route, the player usually doesn't make Chris feel nice, right? Chris is forced to be pushy with Noel. Chris is forced to break Susie and Noel's relationship. So we can presume the ruder choices here are meant for the weird route, yes? This means in the same route that Noel is forced to get stronger, where Chris drowns himself, is the same that RALSEI is denied autonomy. RALSEI is forced to go with the prophecy in the weird route. She's forced to stay a prince, forced to not have opinions, forced to fulfill the ending she is still terrified of seeing. In simple, you can't have RALSEI with autonomy because it goes against the prophecy, and you can't be a pacifist because it also goes against the prophecy. Alright, now about the merging. How could Chris and Noel both be the angel? Well, that actually has been set up in previous chapters. In Chapter 4, Chris forces the ring onto Noel in a terrifying show of the player's power over both of them. Later on, though, if you think about Noel instead of Susie during this route, a small red pixel is seen moving across the screen. Chapter 5's weird route also begins with the same pixel. I believe this pixel could be a part of Chris's soul, or at least a determined soul inside of Noel. Noel is shown to hear the player even when Chris is down, and we can hear her thoughts in the weird route. Well, yes, we can see snippets of Susie's thoughts in parentheses occasionally. It is not as often as Noel, and usually only for a joke. Noel, though, through the process of the weird route, gets closer and closer to the soul over time. But one specific detail that really sets this in for me is the Burley fight, the dreaded Snowgrave. The UI of the battles commonly shows dialogue, but is usually prefaced with sprites. If Susie talks, a Susie sprite is shown. If RALSEI talks, a RALSEI is shown. In the beginning, Noel does have a talk sprite in this section, but after Snowgrave, she doesn't. Instead, her dialogue is treated as narration, filling up the whole box with no emotion attached to it, just like Chris's narration all throughout the game. Narration isn't usually acknowledged by others unless it's a gag, only by the player to see and use. Noelle's thoughts becoming narration in her final moments of Chapter 2 are showing her slow merge with the soul. This is only further shown in Chapter 5. There's little to no narration in Chapter 5's weird route, at all. This is because the soul is becoming even more merged with the both of them. Why use narration when Noel is saying what's happening right now? Chris can't handle the soul alone anymore, too beaten down and too exhausted, so Noel will help them. They will merge, and that pixel will bloom into a new soul of its own, one encompassing both of them. Noelle's thoughts of the lake are even using the text sound reserved for narration. And again, there's no sprite associated with it until she starts speaking aloud. I've also seen some compare the end to the barrier in Undertale, the barrier which notoriously needs both a human and a monster soul to cross. In any non-true pacifist route of Undertale, the player kills Asgore and takes his soul to cross. And earlier in the timeline, Azrael and Kara merge their souls together after Kara is killed in order for Azrael to cross. While what's happening in Deltarune might not be a barrier, specifically, I do think something similar could be happening with their souls. I mean, this whole chapter was about nostalgia. There were so many goddamn Undertale references in this chapter. Why not reference the barrier with their souls merging into one, all-powerful being like Azrael became? But instead of the god of hyperdeath with rainbow wings and a big powerful laser, they become the angel. Chris and Noelle get their wings, they get their freedom, becoming the angel together as the prophecy destined them to be. So while I've explained my reasoning for believing they're the angel, I haven't explained why they aren't the knight. But I actually believe it's quite obvious why. I believe the knight is either Death or Carol, first of all. Specifically, I believe that Carol is the red herring, while Death is the actual knight. Truly, it could go either way. It's not Rudy, don't say it's fucking Rudy, I swear. The knight has much more reasons to be Death or Carol. I'm sure there's other videos more clearly explaining the evidence for that, but I'll give a rundown of why all this means the knight can't be Chris and Noelle fused. The knight has a weapon that could either be Death's bat or Carol's katana. Personally, I think it looks more like a bat, while the katana is a red herring. The weapon doesn't look like what Chris or Noelle uses to fight. It's not a smaller sword, and the knight never uses ice magic or is shown to have a ring. The antlers are also a big piece of the knight being one of the holidays, but that's it. The knight doesn't have any human characteristics, only deer ones. If Chris and Noelle fused to become the knight, why would it take on mostly Noelle's form instead of a freaky combo of the two? There's no Chris part of the knight to be seen. It's got deer antlers, deer-like snout, and has lanky limbs that both Chris and Noelle lack. When someone comes into the Dark World, their forms change, yes, but not by that much. Their body doesn't contort into a completely different shape, so why would the knight have that? Even canon fusions of characters we see in Undertale with the amalgamates don't have that much of a shape difference. Snowdrake's mom keeps the same shape, just with different parts. Lemon Bread has the same shape as Siren, just with a weirder face and teeth. Why would the knight have changed so drastically? Meanwhile, we haven't really seen Death. She could easily look like that, lanky teen limbs with big antlers. There's also no visible soul. When Chris fights, their soul comes out. But with the knight, we do see something in their chest, and it's not a soul. It looks more like an evil eye or something. It's not a monster soul, it's not a human soul, and it doesn't look like a combo of the two either. If a part of Chris was in there, we would be seeing their soul, or at least a part of it, or something that resembles it. This is more so proving Death, but the knight's movements also show it's not Chris's Noelle. They move in an ice skater or figure skater-like fashion, almost as if they're dancing. Neither Noelle nor Chris ever make any moves like this in-game, and we see examples of Chris themselves dancing. We don't ever see a knight doing this jig, do we? But we do know that Death ice skated as she skates in her room. The most we ever see with Noelle with ice skates is just the design of a roller coaster cart. And the knight has attacks not like anything Chris and Noelle do either. If anything, they're more similar to Azrael's from Undertale, and also Zanz's for some reason. But neither of them are the knight, I'm not saying that. Their sword attacks aren't like Chris or even Aqua attacks, and the knight doesn't use anything resembling ice magic either. Carol also has a connection to the knight in some form that's obvious. Whether she is the knight herself or just in cahoots with them, that's up for debate. But she actively knows of the knight, we can assume, with her investigations of the bunker and protectiveness of Death's guitar with the codes in it. Carol is also very protective of Noelle for the smallest thing, from video game violence to going out with Susie. If Carol knew Noelle and Chris became the knight, why bother hiding anything from them? Why not prepare them in advance? Make them get stronger. Carol knew the knight was her daughter. She wouldn't be so protective while still trying to work with the knight and keep their identity hidden. She'd make Noelle get stronger on her own, training whatever way she could. She forces Death into sports she hates. Why wouldn't she do the same to Noelle? Noelle wouldn't be able to say no to her either, would she? And why the hell would a knight containing Noelle willingly work with Carol? Noelle's whole motivation for going to the lake was wanting to run away. She hated being with her mom. It wouldn't make sense for her to do a 180 and suddenly decide, oh no, I like working with my mom actually. No, she'd kill her. Noelle would want to try to kill her just like she did Bertley. But no, Carol hasn't been kidnapped or hurt ever in this process. She's not Asgore or Toriel trying to get taken, she's not Undyne. Despite Undyne having a code, the mayor has a code and she hasn't been taken yet either. Speaking of relationships with parents, this brings Chris into consideration. Chris doesn't hate their parents. Sure, the relationship might be rocky at times, but they don't hate them. So why would the knight endanger both Toriel and Asgore if they were part of Chris? Chris wouldn't want to hurt their parents, and if they did, they would have tried that already. Noelle doesn't hate Chris's parents either. In fact, Noelle likes Toriel and cares for Asgore, even if she is pitying him a bit. It would make sense for a Chris-Noelle night to endanger them, right? We also know the knight has a relationship of some kind with Chris. But if the knight were a fusion of Chris and Noelle, shouldn't they see Chris as an equal? This is who they were, who they are destined to eventually become. They should be equals, or at the very least in a mentor-esque position to Chris, but they aren't. The knight treats Chris like a lackey, like a pawn to do their bidding. Chris is made to kneel in front of the knight, submit to their every will, which isn't exactly something you do to an equal. You do this to someone who you think less of, who's at your very command, not if you're teaching them. And Chris's friends! God, I keep seeing new reasons why Chris and Noelle could never be the knight. Okay, Chris cares deeply for Susie and RALSEI. This is clearly shown in Chapter 3 during the sword rout. When you force Chris to kill Susie and RALSEI, they flinch in fear. They don't enjoy murdering their friends, even in a video game. Noelle loves Susie, she cares for her. So why the hell would a Chris-Noelle knight knock down Susie and RALSEI in cold blood? The knight doesn't care about them because the knight has never even met them. Jess wouldn't have an opinion on either Susie or RALSEI, so she could easily kill them without remorse. And Carol, on the other hand, wouldn't give a shit about RALSEI having never met her, and would despise Susie as she dislikes Noelle's fondness of her. Lastly, I will mention this detail from Chapter 5. The knight was noted to have made dark worlds from a long time ago. Now, while a long time ago is kept vague for obvious reasons, I think it's reasonable to assume that this detail was placed for a reason. Specifically, I think it was to tell us that someone older, that's not Chris, has been making the fountains, and that this directly impacts Dessa's disappearance. I mean, we know Asgore's conspiracies are about Dessa's disappearance, what else would they be? And this shows that the fountains are a part of that. Now why the hell would Noelle be a part of her sister's disappearance? The knight can't be Noelle because Noelle would never endanger her sister. She loves Dess, and the disappearance haunts her every day. This also acts as a way to disprove Carol. Carol wouldn't endanger her other daughter either. What I think happened in the simplest of terms is that Jess created a fountain when she was maybe Chris's age or younger. This was the beginning of Dark Worlds, which let her escape into a better reality and eventually disappear completely. The Dark Worlds were where she met Friend, the glitch in the game, and tried to get Noelle and Chris to come with her into this better reality. When they all went into the forest, Friend was the reason for her disappearance. Noelle can't remember what happened, and Chris forces themselves to repress their memories, unwilling to think about what happened that day. So in conclusion of this, Grilby is the knight. So the knight is absolutely not Chris and Noelle fused together. It's probably Dessa or Carol, as most already deduced after chapters 3 and 4 came out, or at least I hope. Just so that's clear. If you weren't aware, you can actually abort the weird route. Well, kind of. The ominous sound effect does not play. However, you can stop Chris and Noel from reaching the end of the lake together by simply not pressing proceed and letting the screen fade to white. This plays the cutscene I had just shown, then allows you to enter the Dark World. Needless to say, this version is odd. It's not an aborted weird route, but it isn't the full weird route either. Either way, this version allows us to see what I consider an aborted prophecy route. As I explained before, I believe the weird route is the prophecy. But here, it didn't happen. Chris and Noel didn't proceed. They didn't merge into the angel. The ending of the prophecy did not occur. RALSEI, as we know, was terrified of the prophecy's end, worries over Chris and the weird route, as Susie says when you're walking with her. But as you enter the Dark World in this aborted prophecy route, RALSEI is utterly relieved that Chris is okay. She knew something was going on with them. She knew they were in danger. Of what? Well, of the prophecy's end. RALSEI can't account for the weird route suddenly stopping right there at the lake, because it shouldn't be possible. Chris should have gone on with Noel, but they didn't. And now RALSEI realizes that the prophecy may be able to change after all. What she didn't account for is that the weird route never actually ended. A big part of Susie and her character development is subverting the prophecy, right? She didn't equip ribbons until this chapter. She swears to not let the ending happen. Hell, she may not even be a part of the prophecy at all. Well, going off the weird route being the prophecy, in Chapter 5 you physically can't kill Flowery, no matter how much I wanted to. Susie, as her prophecy-defying self, will not let you. Now, you can attack the other flowers, and they can't be healed, but only because of one another. Aqua's fight is cut short by someone telling her to quit, or else. Seth can be knocked down but comes back later, and Yellow protects Blue from being hurt while Blue heals them both. But Flowery doesn't get healing help from the other flowers or himself. Susie is the one to declare that they aren't going to hurt them, and she heals him every time you attack, along with RALSEI. I'm sure it's for non-lore reasons that you can't actually kill the flowers just because it was messed up a lot, but I think it's interesting how the game handles this issue by tying it in with Susie's development and subversion of the prophecy. This is also partly why I'm calling this route Shattered Prophecy, as throughout it forces you not to kill things. Now, there aren't many differences in the Shattered Prophecy route, but one I want to point out is the character description differences. Normally in Chapter 5, Chris is titled Blue Rose with the description of quiet but flirtatious. However, in this route they're called a shattered rose, described as only one knows the rose's meaning. Now personally, I love flower symbolism. There's so many things you can do with it. We all know roses are symbolic of romance, but what exactly does a blue rose represent, and furthermore a wilted one? When researching this, I actually found this site which told me the very first meaning a blue rose can have is freedom. But there are other meanings too. Here, which I found interesting, says blue roses embody the concept of attaining the impossible. Attaining the impossible, a theme repeated throughout Deltarune, specifically in this chapter, is recognized directly, but only if you're not doing the weird route. This would lend itself to proving that a pacifist route is subverting the prophecy, yes. Even blue roses themselves are not natural and are human-made. Blue roses as a concept are defying their very nature. Wilted roses, meanwhile, often represent a failed or unrequited romantic relationship, and wilted blue roses can imply an omen of unfortunate events is set to occur. An unrequited relationship can easily be seen in the weird route. You can take it two ways, actually. I've seen many people consider Chris to have an unrequited crush on Susie, one that is left to fester as Susie is with Noel instead. It could also represent a shattered relationship between Chris and Noel, though. The weird route constantly makes you force a relationship between Chris and Noel. You must tell the Addisons that they're dating, you must get Noel a ring, and you must tell Noel that she will ride with Chris on the Ferris wheel. Despite both of them being uncomfortable with this, you can't finish the weird route without doing this. I think this Shattered Rose title could only show Susie and Noel's failed relationship, but Chris's shattered relationship with Noel having been forced into something they're not. In fact, all of Chris's relationships are shattering, slowly, one by one, as the player forces them to do more and more cruel things. I think a big issue to address here is, what the hell does the angel actually want? Prophecy shown to us at the very start of the game, and right before you start playing a chapter, tells us that the goal of the heroes is not to defeat the Titans, not to stop the night, but to banish the angels' heaven. I'm not the only one who thought that was a weird word choice, right? Why banish a heaven? Why wouldn't it be called the angels' hell instead if it's risking the world's end? Well, I think it's called that because of the angel's own desires. The angel itself would have created this heaven, right? So the angel as Chris and Noel would fuel each of their desires into creating this heaven. Their heaven, not anyone else's. It's only theirs. So what do Noel and Chris want? Freedom. Noel wishes for freedom from her life, and Chris wishes for freedom from the soul, perhaps even the night as well. But, well, as we can see in everything here in Chapter 5, Noel isn't thinking exactly clearly. I don't think suddenly becoming a fucking angel of the prophecy would exactly help that either. Noelle is taking drastic measures to get her freedom. I don't think it's too far-fetched to suggest that Noelle would be willing to cause the end of the world in order to achieve her freedom. I mean, she tried to drown herself. And Chris! She won't be thinking rationally here. Spamton. Stupid fucking Spamton. Spamton was willing to try and take over this world for freedom. Wasn't he? He completely changes the game, taking over Queen's Castle and claiming he's becoming God. Spamton, who had the tiniest taste of freedom, who was the start of all this weird route nonsense, was willing to destroy his world and influence 2 teenagers to murder his whole town in order to gain his freedom. Spamton is also known to relate to Chris. A lot. Chris, in a normal route, is very upset after his battle as they see themselves in his predicament. Puppet, unable to cut his strings, tried until the end to get his freedom and never succeeded. He was only ever able to move on due to Chris taking him as an item. He still never got his true freedom, his true dream realized. Chris is terrified of becoming him, of letting the soul take over their life, of letting the soul puppet them around forever. Chris, just as easily, could slip into the same mindset. In the normal route, they know this. They're incredibly aware of how similar they and Spamton are. But in the weird route, we can't see their emotions. And they don't even see a semi-happy end for Spamton. In an attempt to rid themselves of the soul, and in Noelle's attempt to truly be free from her life, both Chris and Noelle will unite as a force to destroy Hometown through the Angels' heaven. In their heaven, and they will finally be free. I would like to bring this panel of the prophecy to light. They'll hear the ring of heaven's call. Now, I want to focus on the composition of this image. This panel of the prophecy reminds me of Chris's panel of the cage. It takes both the ring, like Noelle wears to fight, as well as hands circling around it like they do Chris's soul. This panel symbolically shows the player taking control of Noelle through the freeze ring and then relates it to the angel's heaven. For this panel, they could have easily shown a version of the art when RALSEI explains the prophecy, but they don't, for some reason. And the panel about the knight shows hands too, but they're in a completely different positioning. Here the hands are the exact same as the cage panel. The cage panel shows hands, the player's hands if you will, controlling the soul of Chris. Then they move on to control Noelle through the thorn ring as we did in chapter 2. And then with this panel, the panel that questions whether Susie is even a part of the prophecy at all, shows a girl that could easily also be Noelle, but while neither of them have swords, why wouldn't it show an axe if this was meant to be Susie? But I'm not going to focus on that. Plenty of discussion has been had over whether or not this is Susie. For the sake of this theory, I'm going to say it isn't. I'm going to say this panel is showing Noelle. So, already I think this is especially important considering the merge I talked about earlier about Chris and Noelle becoming one as the angel. The soul here is clearly shown to be inside of Noelle, but that's not all. The phrase love making its way to the girl. If you're familiar with Undertale, you should be able to guess where I'm going with this. The prophecy text is in all caps, meaning we can't tell if this panel is talking about love, as in her romance with Susie, or love, the acronym. If you don't know Undertale, Sans gives you a speech at the end of each of your routes in Judgment Hall. He tells you that if you kill monsters, you gain love, an acronym standing for level of violence, lest you distance yourself from the people you're harming and ultimately get stronger. I believe this is simply further proving that the weird route is the intended end of the prophecy, as well as Chris's and Noelle's merge. Why else show the soul inside of her? If the heart was, say, above her head, I wouldn't be so quick to make it the connection. And before anyone says, well, monsters have souls too, their souls are upside down. These panels also lead into the reveal of the final part of the prophecy, meaning this love Noelle gets is important to the ending, the one Susie said she won't let happen. We know the prophecy can be vague and slightly cryptic as it never names things or people directly. The Flower Man instead of Asgore, the Lord of Screens instead of Tenna. The only exception to this is Queen, because, well, Queen isn't normally a name, so to everyone reading the prophecy, it's big enough. So what exactly does the final prophecy say? I think it would be weird if it just outright stated Chris and Noelle will have to be killed. That's not right. But I'd like to remind that Susie is under the impression that the girl is her. So with that in mind, I believe the end of the prophecy could say something along the lines of, the girl in the cage must be sacrificed, or perhaps that they kill one another. This would exactly be the kind of prophecy to earn the reactions that it did from Susie and RALSEI. Susie would never let her friend die, and she wouldn't try to hurt them either. Meanwhile, RALSEI tries to make the adventure as fun as possible, to ensure Chris and Susie at least got to be happy before such a horrendous end. RALSEI would also have a motivation for encouraging them not to fight. The prophecy ends in violence because of the violence enacted throughout the adventures. It makes perfect sense for RALSEI to try her best to not even let a minimal amount of violence happen, because the tiniest slip-up could bring what causes her 2 best friends their demise. But why would Chris and Noelle have to be killed? Well, look what they did in order to become the angel. How else would everyone in Hometown take this? To them, it looks like a joint suicide. The only other explanation for why they would be killed, if it wasn't by one another, is because we, the player, kill them once they become the angel. So, I can say that Chris and Noelle are the angel all day, but how would this actually play out in the game? Now, this part of the theory is more rambling than theory. Yes, I'll have some evidence, but this is really just me throwing out ideas for what I believe could happen in Chapter 7 with the weird route. The biggest point is that, well, if Chris is part of the angel, who would we play as? Well, who other than your wonderful creation? The vessel from the very, very beginning. I mean, come on! Chekhov's goddamn gun! You can't open the game with this and then never show it again. It would be perfect for the weird route. The whole weird route is about control, right? The player controls Chris to their will, forcing them to do things they hate, say things they don't believe, and forces their wishes onto Chris instead of trying to coexist. It's also about heteronormativity, but that's a different video. The vessel is exactly what the player wants. It is the true self-insert for the player, the puppet to control to their will instead of Chris. You even named the thing after yourself. Playing as the vessel would achieve Chris's heaven, wouldn't it? Chris would finally be free, forcing the soul to move on to a different victim. But we would still need to fulfill Noelle's heaven, right? So, what could happen would be, well, Roots. If you haven't seen the Roots theory, do go watch it, it's very good. But essentially, using the sword route as foreshadowing, I believe for the final chapter, a dark world will open up in all of Hometown, or perhaps the true roaring is what's happening, but everyone will be forced into a dark world. And as the player, we have the option to fulfill the wishes of the angel, of Noelle, and kill off Hometown for her. Also, a dark world in Hometown would be a great final adventure, a final challenge for the end. We have to stop the roaring, stop the end of the world. You have the choice to either fulfill Noelle's heaven, or banish the angel's heaven and stop the world from ending. But who would be the boss? Well, who other than the angel themselves? The final boss would be the amalgamate of Chris and Noelle as the angel, attempting to destroy Hometown. I mean, we already fought a Titan, we already fought the Knight, both big parts of the prophecy. Why not end it all with the angel? That's how the prophecy RALSEI tells was supposed to end, wasn't it? And as an extra part, because well, why the fuck not? I think it would be really cool if you couldn't beat the angel unless you did a normal route. So we know now that you can't fulfill the quest with either the shadow crystals or the egg in the weird route. But if Sham takes their crystals from Mew Mew, they'll make what they've been talking about for so long. I think this object, whether a weapon or a piece of armor or something else entirely, should be the key to defeating the angel. I mean, if you play the weird route, you brought this on yourself. You wanted them to do this. You made them. In the weird route, you reap what you sow. You can't banish the angel's heaven because you brought it into existence in the first place. So, thanks for hearing me ramble for however long this video ends up being. This started out as just me going, haha, why I spammed it calling them an angel, to, oh fuck, this might actually be something. I hope I've made enough sense here and convinced some people in the future of Deltarune. Either way, I'm excited for whatever happens next. If anything the recent chapters have taught us is that Deltarune is truly unpredictable. But I know it'll be amazing. Until next time. Okay, I want to know how the hell do you dodge this stack? It was the bane of my existence trying to beat the weird route myself to get string shots for this theory.